Good day, baristas!
I am Angelo Josh Tikausin.
I'm Divine.
I am Wynna Dingli.
I am Resume and Magancong.
I am Shona and Carlas.
I am Auntie Joshua D. Rubas.
I am Leoñora Ransom Frey.
And we are the Group 3 from STEM 1212, presenting to you our presentation about the properties of matter. So what are you waiting for? Let's go!
You can see that most of the time, the substances around us are not in their pure form. They are basically a mixture of two or more substances. Interestingly, mixtures tend to also come in different forms. Therefore, there are several types of separation techniques, namely chromatography, distillation, evaporation, and filtration, that are used in segregating a mixture of substances. As for the need for separation, it is usually done to remove all the unwanted materials and to obtain useful components. And so, let us discuss them one by one.
Have you heard about it? Yes, no, okay then. This point in time I will cover in the chromatography. In most chromatography, there is what we call mobile phase and a stationary phase. Usually, the stationary phase is a solid or a liquid that bound to a solid. It might be the fibers and the paper that you're doing paper chromatography, or it might be the surface of particles in fact bed if you're doing column chromatography. The mobile phase is the liquid or gas that flowing past stationary phase. In column chromatography, it's either moving due to gravity or move commonly pop. In the paper chromatography, it's the wicking action of the paper that's driving it. The compound will tend to partition into the stick of the surface of the stationary phase. It is not strong interaction, so they will tend to stick for a while and then go back in the mobile phase. Each compound will have a characteristic fraction if the time they spend in the stationary phase. A compound that spends almost no time with the stationary phase will travel close to the velocity of mobile phase is moving. If the compound spends half of each phase, which means the velocity will be half the velocity of the mobile phase, because different compounds have different partition coefficients, they will have different velocities and they will become separated. There can be many mechanisms to the interaction with the stationary phase. It can be an oil phase bonded to particles that molecules partition into reverse phase chromatography. The stationary phase can be forest particles and only the smaller molecules can get into the forest, while the largest one can size exclusion chromatography. The stationary phase may be ionic and oppositely charged ions tend to adhere ion chromatography. There are dozens of others, and very often there is more than one mechanism at work at a given time. We might not even know for certain what the mechanism is, but we can still perform the separation.
Hello there! Have you ever admired the shapes of clouds? Clouds form when water vapor in the atmosphere rises and meets cool air. The cool air causes the water to then condense into droplets. The same process of condensation is at work during distillation, which is essentially when a liquid is purified through temperature changes. The condensation that results when a warm vapor cools is a key process in distillation. You might have also heard of distillation as the method to produce alcoholic spirits. In chemistry, it can really be in a liquid as the definition earlier. The process of distillation begins with heating a liquid to boiling point. The liquid evaporates, forming a vapor. The vapor is then cooled, usually by passing it through pipes or tubes at a lower temperature. The cold vapor then condenses, forming a distillate. The distillate is a purified form of the original liquid. When the liquid evaporates, many impurities are left behind, so they are not present in the distillate. Chemists use distillation to purify compounds in solution or to separate mixtures of solutes. For example, different compounds have different boiling points. This property means that a more volatile compound will evaporate at a lower temperature than a less volatile compound. Let's look at it this way. Imagine you have a mixture of two compounds. If these compounds have different boiling points, you can separate them using distillation. The process takes advantage of substances readily changing their states of matter from a liquid phase to a gas phase and back to a liquid phase again. The key step is to raise the temperature of the mixture to a point above that of the compound with a lower boiling point. But you also have to make sure it's below that of the compound with the higher boiling point. The compound with the lower boiling point will then evaporate, leaving behind the compound with the higher boiling point. If the vapor is then condensed, you're only going to have the compound with the lower boiling point since you separated the two compounds. Simple, right?
We all have studied about the term evaporation in our elementary schools. There are many situations when this process of evaporation occurs in real life. Have you ever noticed them? Evaporation is a technique used to separate out homogeneous mixtures where there is one more dissolved solids. This method drives off the liquid components from the solid components. The process typically involves heating the mixture until no more liquid remains. Prior to using this method, the mixture should only contain one liquid component, unless it is not important to isolate the liquid components. This is because all liquid components will evaporate over the time. This method is suitable to separate a soluble solid from a liquid. For example, when your brother accidentally added some water to salt, what will you do? Direct heating is quicker but can superheat the solution, potentially degrading the solute and leading to splitting of solid. You can make links to difference between distillation via direct heating and steam distillation, and the use of the latter in separating fragile components. The water which has disappeared did not really disappear, instead it evaporated into a gas called water vapor. Evaporation only occurs when heat is applied, also like when we dry our clothes under the heat of the sun. Did you know, in most cases, the drying of puddles, pond, or even lake is a proof of evaporation taking place?
So, filtration. This is a technique which is an insoluble solid separated from liquid. By this, it is used filter-like mesh cloth or filter paper to separate solid components from the liquid. This process is used if you want to water-free from your solid particles. You can also use filtration if you want to separate sand from the mixture of sand and water. Because sand is insoluble or does not dissolve in water. Filtration is a method for separating an insoluble solid from a liquid. When a mixture of sand and water is filtered, the sand stays behind the filter paper. It becomes the residue. Next, the water passes through the filter paper. It becomes the filtrate. The slide shows how the filtration works. A beaker containing a mixture of insoluble solid and liquid. There is a filter paper in a filter funnel above another beaker. The mixture of insoluble solid and the liquid is poured into the filter funnel. You can see the liquid particles are small enough to pass through the filter paper as a filter. The solid particles are too large to pass through the filter paper and stay behind as a residue. What a basic process, everyone!
A mixture is actually made up of pure substances only, but they get mixed with each other in a mixture. Sometimes, the individual pure substances are more important than the mixture. Thus, Separation of substances is necessary to obtain pure substances for domestic purposes, industrial purposes, and research work. And also, separating mixtures is beneficial in our everyday life. Here are some benefits of separating mixtures. Having a drinking water, segregation of non-biodegradable to biodegradable waste, separating mixtures in mining gold, copper, and other minerals, cleaning oil spills, separating rocks from sands in a construction.
And that is it for our presentation about the properties of matter. Again, we are the group 3 from STEM 1212 and we hope that you've learned something today. Thank you and God bless. See you!